Hello, story lovers. Tonight we're diving into a tale of passion, secrets, and choices that could change everything. Hearts will be broken, love will be tested, and every twist will leave you on the edge of your seat. Comment below where you're watching from. And if this story moves you, hit like, subscribe. Share it with someone who loves a powerful love story. And tap the bell so you never miss the next thrilling chapter. Ready? Let's begin. The salt-stained windows of the cottage couldn't hide the truth anymore. Maya Rodriguez pressed her forehead against the cold glass, watching storm clouds gather over the Pacific like dark omens. 6 weeks since she'd fled San Francisco. 6 weeks since discovering Marcus with his assistant in their shared bed. Her engagement ring still warm on the nightstand where she'd left. It thought the cottage perched on Mendocino's cliffs had promised isolation. No cell towers. No neighbors. No reminders of the life she'd built and lost. Her editor expected the manuscript for her third novel, but every time she opened her laptop, the cursor blinked mockingly at blank pages. Thunder cracked overhead. And with it came the sound of heavy machinery rumbling down the coastal road. Maya's stomach dropped. The nearest neighbor was supposed to be miles away. She grabbed her rain jacket and stepped into the storm. Wind whipped her dark hair as she followed the muddy path north, her boots slipping on rain-slicked rocks. After 20 minutes of hiking through sheets of rain, she crested a hill and froze, where pristine forest had stood just days ago. A massive construction site sprawled across the clifftop. Workers in yellow hard hats moved like ants around the skeletal frame of what looked like a glass cathedral. The structure defied the wild landscape with its sharp angles and impossible geometry. A man stood at the edge of the chaos, his phone pressed to his ear, gesturing violently at blueprints that flapped in the wind. Even through the rain, Maya could see he commanded the space. Workers approached him with deference. Waiting for orders like soldiers before a general, he turned, and their eyes met across 50 yards of mud and machinery. Dark hair plastered to his head, expensive jacket soaked through, but his stance remained unshakable. He ended his call and walked toward her through the storm. "You must be the writer," he called over the wind, extending a hand as he approached. His voice carried traces of an accent she couldn't place. British? Australian? Maya reluctantly shook his hand, noting the firm grip and the fact that he somehow knew who she was. "How did you word travels fast in small communities?" "I'm James Blackwood. I own this land." His smile was sharp, predatory. "And you're destroying my sanctuary." Lightning illuminated James's face, revealing features that belonged in boardrooms rather than construction zones. High cheekbones, calculating gray eyes. A mouth that suggested he was used to getting exactly what he wanted. "Your sanctuary was never permanent," he said, rain dripping from his hair. "I've owned this land for 3 years. The permits alone took 18 months. Maya gestured at the destruction around them. "You're building a mansion. In the middle of nowhere. For what?" "Not a mansion. A retreat center," his voice hardened. "Somewhere brilliant minds can gather without distraction. Away from the noise of the world. By creating more noise," Maya had to shout over another crack of thunder. "How long will this take?" 8 months. Maybe 10. The words hit her like a physical blow. 8 months of her carefully constructed peace shattered by his corporate playground. 8 months of this. The loudest phase will be over in 6 weeks. After that, just finishing work. James stepped closer. Close enough that she could see water droplets clinging to his lashes. "Look, I understand this disrupts your solitude. But this project matters more than you can imagine." "More than what?" "Your profit margins?" Something flickered across his face. Pain. Vulnerability. Gone in an instant. "More than my life." The intensity of his words caught her off guard. This wasn't about money or ego. Something deeper drove him. Something desperate. "Why?" The question escaped before she could stop it. James studied her through the storm, rainwater streaming down his face like tears. "Because sometimes running away isn't enough. Sometimes you have to build something worth coming back to." His words hit too close to home. Maya turned away, but his hand caught her wrist. gentle, electric. Maya, her name on his lips, sounded different, intimate. Have. Let me explain properly. She looked down at his hand on her wrist, then back at his face. Every instinct screamed danger. Men like James Blackwood collected things. Beautiful things. Broken things. I don't date anymore, she said. It's not a date. It's a negotiation. Thunder crashed overhead, and in that moment of deafening noise, Maya saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. The same raw desperation she recognized in her own reflection. Against every rational thought, she heard herself say, 7 o'clock. My cottage. James smiled, and this time it reached his eyes. I'll bring wine. As she walked away through the storm, Maya felt his gaze burning into her back. She'd just invited a predator to her sanctuary. Asterisk. Maya spent the entire next day convincing herself to cancel. By 6:30, she'd changed clothes 3 times, settling on jeans and a sweater that suggested casual indifference. At exactly 7 o'clock, James knocked. He stood on her doorstep holding an expensive bottle of wine and looking nothing, like the rain-soaked construction boss from the night before. Dark slacks, white button-down sleeves rolled to reveal strong forearms. Devastating in his simplicity. Peace offering, he said, holding up the bottle, and an apology for my terrible first impression. Maya led him to the small kitchen, hyper-aware of his presence in her intimate space. He moved like someone comfortable in any environment, but his eyes cataloged every detail. Her abandoned manuscript pages on the coffee table. The engagement photo she turned face down but hadn't thrown away. The empty wine bottles that revealed too much about her coping mechanisms. Tell me about the retreat center, she said. Pouring wine with steadier hands than she felt, James settled into the chair across from her. And suddenly, the kitchen felt impossibly small. Have you ever lost someone who mattered more than your own life? The question blindsided her. I'm not sure that's any of your business, fair enough. But it's the only way to explain why I'm building something that costs more than most people make in a lifetime. He took a slow sip of wine, never breaking eye contact. My brother died 2 years ago. Cancer. 28 years old. Maya felt her defenses crack slightly. I'm sorry, he was brilliant. The kind of mind that comes along once in a generation. Working on revolutionary cancer treatments, environmental solutions, technologies that could change everything. James's voice dropped to barely above a whisper, and he died before he could finish any of it. The pain in his voice was so raw, so familiar, that Maya had to look away. She understood running from grief. She understood the desperate need to make meaning from loss. The retreat center isn't about profit, James continued. It's about bringing together the kind of minds like David's, giving them space to think, to collaborate, to finish what people like him started. That's beautiful, Maya said quietly. But why here? Why this specific piece of land? James was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he spoke, his voice was barely audible. Because this is where I scattered his ashes. The admission hung between them like a live wire. Maya felt tears prick her eyes. She'd been so quick to judge him, to see only destruction where he saw a memorial. Maya, he said, leaning forward. What are you running from? The wine had loosened her defenses. Or maybe it was the way he'd trusted her with his deepest wound. My fiancé's. 3 years together. I found him with someone else 6 weeks ago. I'm sorry. In our bed. Wearing my grandmother's ring? The words tumbled out. Wine and grief making her reckless. They'd been together for 8 months. Everyone knew, except me. James reached across the small table and covered her hand with his. His skin was warm, calloused in unexpected places. Some people are cowards. They take the easy path instead of having difficult conversations, like building walls instead of dealing with grief. His thumb traced across her knuckles. Exactly like that. They sat in charged silence, the air between them crackling with possibility. Maya should pull her hand away. Should remember that beautiful, damaged men were how she'd ended up heartbroken in the first place. Instead, she turned her palm up and let their fingers intertwine. This is complicated, she whispered. The best things usually are. James lifted their joined hands and pressed his lips to her knuckles. The gesture was old-fashioned, tender, and absolutely devastating. "I should go," he said, but he made no move to leave. "You should." Neither of them moved. The cottage felt suspended in time, rain pattering against windows, candlelight flickering across their faces. Maya could feel herself falling, could feel her carefully constructed walls crumbling. James stood slowly, still holding her hand. "Maya, don't say anything else," she whispered. "Not tonight." He nodded, understanding passing between them like electricity. At the door, he turned back. "For what it's worth," he said, "Marcus is an idiot." After he left, Maya sat in the flickering candlelight, her hand still tingling where he'd kissed it. She was falling for another beautiful liar. She could feel it happening and seemed powerless to stop it. But this time felt different. This time felt dangerous in ways that had nothing to do with heartbreak. Asterisk for 3 weeks. They danced around each other like opposing magnets. James would appear on her morning walks, coffee in hand, ready with stories about his brother or questions about her abandoned novel. They'd talk for hours on the clifftop, watching construction slowly transform his memorial into reality. Maya, I began timing her writing breaks to coincide with his site visits. She told herself it was curiosity about the building process, but she knew better. She was becoming addicted to the way he looked at her, like she was something precious, something worth protecting. One evening, as fog rolled in from the Pacific, James knocked on her door with takeout from the town's only decent restaurant. "Construction was loud today," he said. "Let me make it up to you." They ate on her deck, sharing stories and wine as the sky deepened from purple to black. When James laughed at something she said, really laughed, Maya felt something dangerous unfurl in her chest. "Can I ask you something?" she said as they finished the second bottle. "Anything. Why haven't you kissed me?" The question hung in the salt air between them. James set down his wine glass and turned to face her fully. "Because when I kiss you," he said, his voice low and rough, "there won't be any going back. For either of us. Maybe I don't want to go back." James stood and pulled her to her feet. His hands framed her face, thumbs tracing her cheekbones. "Maya, you need to be sure." Instead of answering, she rose on her toes and kissed him. The first touch of his lips was electric. Gentle questioning until she opened to him, and he deepened the kiss with a groan that vibrated through her entire body. His hands tangled in her hair, and she pressed closer. Months of loneliness and grief pouring into the contact between them. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Inside, Maya whispered against his lips. They barely made it through the front door before James pressed her against the wall, kissing her with desperate intensity. His hands mapped her body like he was memorizing every curve, every response. When he lifted her against him, Maya wrapped her legs around his waist and lost herself in the feeling of being wanted. Truly wanted, for the first time in years. Later, as they lay tangled in her sheets, James traced lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "I need to tell you something," he said. Maya's contentment evaporated. Those words. She'd heard them before, right before Marcus destroyed her world. What? James was quiet for so long she thought he'd changed his mind. When he spoke, his voice was careful, controlled. "The land where you're staying. I own that too." Maya bolted upright, sheet clutched to her chest. "What? The Morrison cottage?" "I bought the entire coastal section 3 years ago. Your friend didn't know when she recommended it. You've owned my cottage this entire time?" Maya's voice was deadly quiet. "Yes, and you let me pay rent. You let me think I was safely hidden away while you watched me, while you planned this." "Maya, it's not like that. Get out." The words came out as a whisper, but James flinched like she'd shouted. "Let me explain, get out." James dressed quickly, his face a mask of controlled emotion. At the bedroom door, he turned back. "Maya, please. Let me. If you're not gone in 60 seconds, I'm calling the police." After he left, Maya sat naked in her ruined sanctuary, finally understanding the truth. James Blackwood was exactly like Marcus. Beautiful, charming, completely willing to lie to get what he wanted. She'd been played by an expert. The worst part was that somewhere deep in her chest, her traitorous heart was still beating his name. Maya packed at dawn. She couldn't stay in a place that belonged to him, couldn't breathe air poisoned by another beautiful man's deception. As she loaded her car, she found an envelope slipped under her door. Inside was a property deed. The cottage transferred to her name. A note in James's precise handwriting: "Some gifts have no strings. This place chose you long before I understood why. The construction will stop if you ask me to. Everything stops if you ask me to." Maya crumpled the note, but couldn't bring herself to tear up the deed. She drove south for 6 hours before pulling into a roadside motel. In the harsh fluorescent bathroom light, she finally looked at herself honestly. Running was becoming a pattern. Marcus had hurt her, so she'd run to the coast. James had lied to her, so she was running again. But James hadn't cheated. He'd given her a sanctuary and asked for nothing in return. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Maya, it's James. The construction has stopped. I'm leaving for London tonight. The cottage is yours forever, no matter what you decide about us. I'm sorry I wasn't brave enough to tell you the truth from the beginning. Some walls are harder to tear down than others." Maya stared at the message for an hour. Then she called her editor. "Richard, it's Maya. I need to know something. That retreat center project in Mendocino? Have you heard anything about it? Blackwood Industries. Huge news in the tech world. James Blackwood is funding revolutionary cancer research, bringing together Nobel laureates, the works. Why? Just curious." After hanging up, Maya sat on the motel bed and finally understood. James hadn't lied to manipulate her. He'd lied to protect himself. To keep his grief private until he trusted her enough to share it. She thought about Marcus, who'd lied to have his cake and eat it too. Then she thought about James, who'd lied because trust was terrifying when you'd already lost everything that mattered. The difference was devastation. Maya drove back north. Through the night, she found James at the construction site at sunrise. Sitting alone on a stack of lumber, staring at the half-built shell of his brother's memorial, he looked like he had aged years in 3 days. "The cottage is beautiful," she said, approaching slowly. "Thank you." James turned, and she saw the careful hope in his eyes. "You came back. I'm still furious with you. I know. And I don't forgive Isaly. I know that too." Maya sat beside him on the lumber. The morning fog was lifting, revealing the ocean stretching endlessly toward the horizon. "Tell me about David," she said quietly. James was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was thick with unshed tears. He used to say that love was the only force in the universe stronger than entropy, that it was the only thing that could create order out of chaos. James looked at her, raw vulnerability written across his face. "I thought I'd lost my chance to prove him right." Maya reached for his hand, intertwining their fingers like she had that first night. "Maybe you haven't, maybe we haven't," he corrected. They sat in silence as the sun climbed higher, burning away the fog to reveal a perfect California morning. Around them, the retreat center waited like a promise, like proof that something beautiful could rise from the ashes of loss. "I have conditions," Maya said. "Name them." "I want to help design the memorial garden. And I want a writing studio built into the plans." "Done." "And James." "Yeah, next time you have a secret, tell me before I fall in love with you. It's less devastating that way." James turned to stare at her. "Are you saying I'm willing to find out?" "If you are." James lifted their joined hands and kissed her knuckles, just like he had that first night. But this time, it felt like a beginning instead of an ending. "I love you too," he whispered against her skin, chaos and all. As construction sounds resumed around them, Maya leaned against James's shoulder and watched the Pacific stretch toward infinity. Some storms destroyed everything in their path. Others cleared the air for something better. This felt like something better. The end.